Wait a minute, have you ever noticed something strange about George Pig? While everyone else in the family gets called by their full name, Peppa Pig, Mummy Pig, Daddy Pig, there's one family member who's just George. Not George Pig, just George. And that's not the only weird thing. Stick around, because we're about to dive deep into one of the most mind-blowing fan theories that's been quietly circulating online. The theory that George might not actually be Peppa's biological brother. By the end of this video, you'll never look at muddy puddles the same way again. Now, before we jump in, I want to be clear. This is all speculation and fan theory. The creators of Peppa Pig have never officially confirmed any of this. But sometimes, the most innocent children's shows hide the most fascinating mysteries, and Peppa Pig is no exception. So grab your favorite snack, get comfortable, and let's explore why thousands of fans believe that George Pig might actually be adopted into the pig family. Trust me, once you hear these theories, you'll never look at muddy puddles the same way again. And by the end of this video, you'll be rewatching episodes with completely different eyes. Let's start with the most obvious clue, the naming convention that started this whole theory in the first place. Think about it. Every single character in Peppa Pig follows a specific pattern. Peppa Pig, Mummy Pig, Daddy Pig, Grandpa Pig, Grandma Pig, even their friends follow this rule. Rebecca Rabbit, Pedro Pony, Susie Sheep, Candy Cat. Everyone gets their species as their last name. But then there's George, just George. Now you might be thinking, come on, he's just a little kid, maybe they simplified it for him. But here's the thing, even the youngest characters in the show get their full names. Richard Rabbit is George's best friend, and he's the same age, but he still gets called Richard Rabbit. Some fans have pointed out that this could be Peppa's own perspective showing through. As one theory suggests, maybe Peppa, being a typical self-centered child, sees herself as the real pig family member, hence Peppa Pig, while viewing her little brother as just George, someone who doesn't quite belong in the same way. It's a subtle detail, but in children's television, these naming patterns are usually very intentional. The fact that George breaks this pattern is either a massive oversight by the creators, or it's a clue. Now let's talk about something that many parents watching with their kids have noticed. The family dynamics in the pig household can be concerning. If you pay close attention to how Mummy and Daddy Pig interact with George versus Peppa, there are some eyebrow-raising moments. Peppa often receives more attention, more patience, and frankly, more love from her parents. Remember the episode where George lost his toy Dinosaur, and instead of comfort, he gets a lecture? Compare that to literally any episode where Peppa has a problem. The entire family mobilizes to fix it. There's even a darker fan theory on TV tropes that suggests Mummy and Daddy Pig are only keeping George around for child benefits, a theory that's surprisingly supported by how they seem eager to get rid of him in multiple episodes. Now this could just be poor writing or the show's way of making Peppa the clear protagonist. But adoption advocates have pointed out that this dynamic, where one child is clearly favored over another, is unfortunately common in families where one child is biological and another is adopted. The parents might not even be conscious of it, but the difference in treatment is noticeable. And kids pick up on these subtleties, which might explain why Peppa often treats George as lesser than, or different. Here's where things get really interesting. Take a good look at the pig family lineup. Notice anything different? While George is pink like the rest of the family, fans have pointed out some subtle but distinct differences that have sparked discussion for years. His proportions seem slightly different. His head shape, his snout structure, even the way his ears sit don't quite match the rest of the family in the same way Peppa clearly resembles Mummy Pig. There's also his voice. When he does speak beyond Dinosaur, it has a different quality to it compared to other young pig characters we see in the show.
Dinosaur.
Now, I know what you're thinking. He's just younger. Kids look different. And that's a fair point, but if you compare George to other young characters in the show, like his friend Richard Rabbit, you'll notice that Richard clearly looks like a smaller version of his parents. The family resemblance is obvious. With George, it's not so clear-cut. Some fans have even suggested that George might be a different subspecies of pig, which could explain the physical differences. But if that were the case, wouldn't the show have mentioned it? The more you look at family photos in the pig household, the more George seems to stand out as the odd one out. It's subtle, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's dive into something that child psychologists who've analyzed the show have pointed out. George's behavioral patterns are actually quite different from what we'd expect from a typical sibling relationship. George shows signs of what some experts call adoption adjustment behaviors. He's often more withdrawn. He has that obsessive attachment to Mr. Dinosaur, which could be a comfort object, helping him cope with early separation trauma. He also shows what psychologists call people-pleasing behavior. Notice how George rarely stands up for himself. Even when Peppa is being mean to him, he just goes along with whatever she says, almost like he's afraid of causing conflict that might get him sent away. There's also his speech development. While it's played for laughs that George mostly just says dinosaur, some fans have theorized that this could represent a speech delay caused by early childhood trauma, something that's unfortunately common in adopted children who experienced instability in their early years. His intense attachment to dinosaurs could also be significant. Child psychologists often note that adopted children sometimes become fixated on extinct things, dinosaurs, ancient civilizations, old movies. There's a theory that this represents their subconscious processing of feeling like their original family is extinct or gone forever. Now, I want to be clear, none of this is confirmed, and there could be completely innocent explanations for all of George's quirks, but when you start connecting the dots, a pattern emerges. Here's something that's always puzzled fans. We know surprisingly little about George's early years compared to Peppa's. The show occasionally shows flashbacks or mentions stories from when Peppa was a baby. We see baby photos, hear cute stories about her first words, her first steps. The family history is rich and detailed when it comes to Peppa. But George's early years, it's like they didn't exist. There are no baby photos of George prominently displayed, no cute family stories about his first words, besides Dinosaur, no mentions of what he was like as a baby. It's almost like George just appeared in the family when he was old enough to walk and talk, which, coincidentally, is exactly when most adoptions occur. Some fans have theorized that the family photos we do see might have been taken after George joined the family, which would explain why there are so few of them and why they all seem to show the family as we know it now, rather than showing a natural progression over time. There's also the curious case of the extended family. Grandma and Grandpa Pig clearly adore Peppa and have tons of stories about her, but their interactions with George seem more like they're trying to be good grandparents to him. But the natural, effortless love they show Peppa isn't quite there with George. Again, this could all be coincidence, but the pattern is hard to ignore once you start looking for it. Now, what do the creators of Peppa Pig have to say about all this? Well, that's where it gets interesting. Neville Astley and Mark Baker, the creators, have been surprisingly tight-lipped about George's background specifically. When asked about character development and family dynamics in interviews, they tend to focus on Peppa and give very general answers about George. There's never been a direct denial of the adoption theory, which some fans find suspicious. Usually, when wild fan theories emerge about children's shows, creators are quick to shut them down. But the Peppa Pig team has remained notably silent on this particular theory. Some fans have interpreted this silence as confirmation, or at least as the creators not wanting to definitively close the door on the possibility. After all, having a character who's adopted could actually be positive representation for adopted children and families. There's also the fact that the show has tackled other complex family situations in subtle ways. They've introduced characters with different family structures, touched on themes of loss and change, and generally shown that they're not afraid to include deeper meanings in their seemingly simple stories. One particularly interesting piece of evidence comes from international versions of the show. In some translations, the naming convention issue becomes even more apparent, with translators struggling to explain why George doesn't follow the same pattern as everyone else. Could the creators have intentionally planted these clues, knowing that adult viewers would pick up on them while kids remained blissfully unaware? It's possible. Now, to be fair, let's look at some alternative explanations for all of this evidence. The naming thing could simply be a stylistic choice to make George seem more childlike and approachable to the target audience. After all, George Pig does sound a bit formal for a toddler character. The behavioral differences could just be personality differences between siblings. Some kids are more outgoing like Peppa, others are more reserved like George. The speech delay could simply be normal variation in child development. The physical differences might be explained by George being much younger. Kids do change a lot as they grow, and baby features can look quite different from adult features. The missing backstory could just be because the show focuses on Peppa as the main character, so naturally her history would be more developed. And the family dynamics? Well, unfortunately, many families do show favoritism, whether consciously or not. It doesn't necessarily mean adoption is involved. The creator's silence could simply be because they never intended for any of this to be analyzed so deeply. Sometimes a children's cartoon is just a children's cartoon. But here's the thing about fan theories: they don't necessarily need to be officially confirmed to be meaningful. If thousands of viewers are picking up on the same subtle clues and coming to similar conclusions, maybe there's something there worth exploring.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Peppa Pig, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more theories about your favorite childhood shows. And hey, if you have a theory about a children's show that's been bugging you, drop it in the comments or send me a message. Your idea could be the next video. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most innocent stories hide the most interesting mysteries. I'll see you in the next one.